Blessed love and peace. 10 before 2. Addenda. Tres cosas. Tres cosas. We're speaking English again. Again, still it's expensive. I didn't mention it before. Still expensive. Land is what we require. For Kutuhusen, mixed heritage mélanger, Kutuhusen and Kutuhauens. These joints are expensive. My personal hourly rate for consultations and such is 5,000 US per hour. So this is beyond a personal consultation. It's 10 before 2 a.m. This is a very compounded, expensive house call, whatever joint this is. It's subsidized by the world system and such. That being said, tres cosas. 3 additional things to share. First of all, not hating anybody. We love everybody. We love all life. We love all beings. We respect all life. We don't agree with everybody. We call out things that we see within ourselves and within those around us that are causing harm to others. Pollution, poison, violence, downpression, and such. I talked before a minute ago about the graves of young children, native children. That's just one example of a system and a history and a current experience of atrocities. I talk about the abduction of native sistren and the murders of native sistren, epidemic style. So I mentioned a little bit about like getting into the further detailed experience, the tangibility of that, looking at the schoolhouse situation, children being murdered, what that actually the act looks like of an adult killing a child who refuses to be a slave, what that looks like, how it's done, what is the look in the adult's eyes when killing a child, what is the look in the child's eyes when being killed. As I mentioned before, what do the adults say to each other before it's done? The normal conversation that adults have with each other, matter of factly, planning it out, strategizing, not to cause disruption amongst the other children, but at the same time, being methodic and carrying it through. What is said afterwards? What is said when the adults are disposing of the bodies? What are the adults saying to each other in that process of disposing the bodies? What is that normal that the adults are presuming or feigning, faking in that moment of killing children and returning into society? What do the adults say when they go back to their homes that day? Sit with their families, have meals, discuss the day's activity. After killing children, what do the families of those people look like when they see their family member returning from that? Knowing or unknowing what happened earlier that day. What do the family members look like? Who go on to their circles, to their schools, to their workplaces, to their churches and congregations and otherwise, their social clubs and societal events. and interact with other people. What does that look like? What are those conversations? Whilst children are being killed at the hands of the members of society. What do the men look like who are being predatory over Native women, or over Native sistren, and prowling in their vehicles at different hours, maybe plotting and preparing, observing routines in residences and otherwise, and hunting in the woods, in the wilderness, on the res and otherwise, and finding that opportunity of isolation. What do those men look like when they take a Native woman against her will, and she finds out, learns, discovers the encroachment of the predator? Maybe it's a smile at first, having a ride or otherwise. That moment that it turns. Maybe it's a nasty from the giddy, approaches, scoops up, brandishes a weapon, and threatens into the vehicle. What does that look like? What does it look like when the man is committing his atrocities and is killing the Native sistren? What does he look like? And what does he look like when he returns home to his family and sits down and breaks bread? What do his family members look like when they look at him? Are they able to see, or are their eyes closed? What do they look like when they go back into their other circles, schools and workplaces and congregations and otherwise, on this day, in this generation? That is what we are addressing. There are atrocities all over the place. And we are working to protect our own as much as we can amidst these atrocities. And that might not avail us of having further empathies, sympathies, and intentionalities in the protection and well-being of the loved ones of others. However, we got to all our relations. So that's some of the first consideration. The second consideration when I'm talking about here, what we're talking about in terms of the criticisms of society, when I tell the United States to shut the fuck up. We don't hate the United States, don't hate Americans. We love everybody. We call things out because harm is being done. Severe, significant harm is being done. There are too few people who are speaking about it, speaking to it, acknowledging it, and there are too many who are pretending, avoiding, are drunk, intoxicated, out of control, and otherwise. And so we speak what we speak, we say what we say, to address the conditions, to encourage the sobriety and the healing. There may be additional methodologies. We may be critiqued for how we do what we do, we invite kinfolk to show us better. So that being said, this is the second joint concerning the United States, but also just concerning the world. Just recognizing that the United States, the world republic, system of republic, has yet to experience the consequences of its actions, the consequences of its atrocities. And by that is meant this. 1 million people, just generally speaking, 1 million people is too much for a king to govern. And similarly, 100 million people is too large for a democracy to govern or for a republic to govern. Now, in the scenario of the king, it's basic understanding of knowing like the actualities of like a monarchy, how government is done throughout the world and throughout the ages. A king has to be a sufficient authority about the different experiences, same blessing, about the different experiences and activities of his sovereignty. Back in the day, through the ages, that often means simply having a basic knowledge of rituals, of basic knowledge, because expertise comes from the priests and advisors, but having a basic knowledge, a functional knowledge. And very often the expertise of the king was in how to fight warfare. Having a basic knowledge of laws and otherwise. Obviously, different kings have their different styles and proficiencies, and in particular areas or others. Some kings are known for being war kings. Some kings are known for being scholarly kings and otherwise through the ages around the lands. But generally speaking, a king has to be literate in the different facets of society to be a sufficient authority for people to trust, and with advisors, and additionally to provide further advance. And he has to be careful and mindful about who he selects as advisors, who are credible amongst their own ilk, to have that credibility. Otherwise, it's overthrow, it's rebellion, it's revolt, it's mutiny, if he is lacking in authority in any particular way, any particular sufficient way, or in any particular way that is sufficiently significant. So, because of that, the larger a kingdom is, obviously the further the riches, the further the spoils, but at the same time, the further the pool of rebellion and finding weaknesses, the further the breadth of knowledge of the different histories of peoples, the different cultures and customs of peoples, and additionally, and without that literacy about the different cultures and customs of people, further susceptibility for disgruntledness, for genius plotting and planning and leveraging overthrow. And so there's only so much a king can know, even the most brilliant kings, and effectively manage, because that's the management. The governing comes into the terms of the relationships with people. And there's delegations of responsibilities and authority. But even in that, there has to be not just a knowledge of names of like, who did I put over this, but know who those people are. And the relationship it has to be proficient. And it gets watered down the bigger the number is. And so, again, 1 million people is a huge number for a person to effectively govern. One can think of like a sports team or whatever else, and what it takes to like for a manager, for a coach to manage a sports team, of daily practice and pep talks and guidance and studies and every skill training and everything, just for that team to be proficient. Him having to know all the players on his squad, their names, their background. When he knows his player thoroughly, then he can better guide the players to be teammates with each other and cultivate synergy, connection and teamwork amongst each other to be further competitive and successful in competing against other teams. It takes a close knowledge of each of the players on his team. That's only with 20 dudes on a team, and with other coaches, and additionally, or 40 dudes on a team. And that's for a campaign just to win a trophy. We're talking about a kingdom of 1,000 people, 1,000-member team, a 10,000-member team. Obviously, Kinfolk can't know everybody's name, everybody's background, all their history and everything of 10,000 people, 100,000 people. Even having a court, a team of managers, coaches, assistant coaches, having a team of 1,000 assistant coaches to govern over 100,000 people, 1,000,000 people. That's a huge amount for a king to be knowledgeable about, just 1,000 people in the court. So point is that once the number, this is a basic general kind of description. Once the number gets to 1,000,000, that's too much for a king of any age, because there's only so much the mind does. You can talk about AI infusions or whatever else, but that's another topic, and sober up, s'il vous plaît. Anyways, 1,000,000 is too much for one king. And in a similar way, the republic, the methodology of the republic is increasing the effective of governing larger numbers, because it intrinsically shares the responsibility. It disguises where the buck stops, so it can be further effective in governing a larger number of people, because the responsibility of governance does not rest exclusively on one person. So it's easier to delegate when the system has effective methodologies of exchange of power positions or whatever. But it can be further effective for a larger number of people. However, that being said, even for the republic, at some point the number gets too big, and we share at the very least 100 million people is too much for any republic in any democracy to govern. Full stop. Because even in a democracy where the responsibilities are shared, there still has to be some meaningfulness within the authority, within the government itself, and some meaningful relationship between each member of society and the governing construct. For the people to have trust, not even to prevent overthrows or rebellions or whatever else, but just to have trust, to be productive, to not be devolve into hedonistic behavior that's hurtful towards each other, because I don't know, and nobody cares anyway, so why not There has to be a meaningful mutual relationship between each member of a society and the governing authority of the society or authorities. And once the number gets to a point of 100 million, just being honest, that's not happening. It's very difficult to perceive an ongoing, enduring, meaningful interaction, relationship, communication between 100 million people and anyone who's charged with governing, any administration that's charged with governing 100 million people. It's beyond the capacity even of a republic and a democracy, because again, it requires a knowledge about customs, culture, the histories of peoples, and there can be methodologies of memorization and having people who are designated for those things. But it's not just a matter of having a rote knowledge of like remembering where the dates are, and additionally, it's understanding what motivates people, people's relationship in the things that are beyond this life, and understanding the ethics and the things that keep people working cooperatively together. And it requires, again, the people seeing the examples of these principles and these customs within the leadership. So it's not just abiding and obeying a faceless authority, even when it's saying the exact right things. That's not what it is. So when the number gets to that size of at least 100 million, it could be even less than that. But at 100 million, that's too much even for a democracy or for a republic to govern that number of people, um, and pretend to have any type of like enduring meaningfulness uh, that's necessary for that to continue. So I can't say necessarily facts, but we can reason about that. So that being said, recognizing what things are at the moment, what it's been like, things are eroding. People are speaking further to that. I mean, in election seasons on this land, people get further into the hype rhetoric, whatever. So that's to be recognized. People still can do the hype rhetoric even when it's not election time, but particularly now. Um, that's what the environment is at the moment. Uh, uh, Fatigue is setting in now at this point, and still got the third thing to share. All right, okay, here we go. Am I done with the second joint? Um, so, um, okay. Oh, so what we share with what we do is an intuitive knowledge, an educated knowledge, a scholarly knowledge, a practical knowledge of methodologies of order between different institutes or different entities of governance, different nations, different societies, how to cooperatively coexist with each other in an optimal way. The ethics, the congruent ethics that facilitate that, but even beyond the ethics, learning how to learn about each other, what to learn about each other, what to recognize as just we just respectfully disagree with this, and what things that I don't have to study at all, um, without being unduly contentious and otherwise amidst that. So we have a knowledge about these things, about guiding people and guiding society, the world society, within these next generations of reconciliation amidst everything unfolding and otherwise. Um, so a big part of that process is making things smaller, making the government smaller and further immediate in terms of the relationship between the administration and the constituency, regardless of what the methodology is, democracy, dictatorship, um, whatever it is, same thing, democracy, dictatorship, potato to potato, whatever. How to guide that type of experience in an optimally healthy and prosperous way. Um, and a number of different methodologies of doing. What are some of the basics that are required in terms of even just the educational systems that facilitate that type of behavior, that guide people into different vocations to contribute to society in those ways, and how to work with others who do differently. So um, that's part of the second joint. Um, so and again, I'm feeling the fatigue now, so concentration is waning. Third joint is actually trippy. This is the kicker. This is somewhat related but different topic, um, and it is what it is. So just describe it. Um, to set this up, what I say first is to describe to show what I described before is that um, There's specific examples that escapes me at the moment, but what I shared before in previous joints, reasonings, combos, soliloquies, however we describe these joints, I describe how there's a recognition that, um, oh, I remember what it is. I mentioned being in law school. I make a recent comment in one of these joints that when I look back at my law school experience and the nastiness that I experienced, and the blessings too, it's all blessings. But what I experienced, in many ways, it's very difficult to reconcile, particularly in the years immediately following law school. Because I mean, long story short, summation. When I completed law school, one, I got failed my last semester. I had to stay another semester off some bullshit. So that was frustrating. And in that process, I'm the only one there. All my friends done bounced. And this is the conclusion of my formal education. So now I'm getting ready for life. A lot of things are happening. And I feel betrayed. I feel like all the people that I went to school with before then are going on to practice and pledge allegiance to a law that calls my ancestors subhuman to this day and are getting rich off of that law, feeling betrayed. What I recognize and what is shared with me very recently, this past year, as I turned 50, is this. And now I go on my spiritual path and I learn again not to get angry, to understand what the conditions are, what the nature of things are, what the purpose of things are, and just recognize it for what it is. Not getting mad at it, not getting mad at people, but still standing our own and calling things out and making decisions accordingly. So, don't hate kinfolk, anybody, particularly from my law school. And what I recently share is that rather than perceiving the kinfolk as betraying me and selling out and going into work into the system for the machine, however much people recognize it as racist or whatever else, classes, genocidal and otherwise, just working for the machine, and perceiving that as selling out, whilst I'm being at the time, 20 years ago, I'm being locked up and tortured and afflicted by the machine, and so it just feels like ultimate betrayal. But like I said earlier this year, what is shared with me and I become further mindful of is that it's actually, I mean, we can look at it in a lot of different ways, and there's an element of truth within every way we look at it. And ultimately, it becomes a matter of how we concentrate ourselves accordingly. So this is what we're looking at this moment, is this explanation of what happens. And what had happened was, it's this. The kinfolk are already obligated to work for the machine before even getting to law school. So it's less of a question, because to deny that, to stop that, and refuse that means catastrophic occurrences within their own lives. So it's less a matter of betraying me personally and intentionally, about continuing to go onto the machine and living a mainstream kind of lifestyle. It's a matter of this is the immediate necessity of kinfolk, because kinfolk are already severely leveraged in order to get to the position, have been guided to be there with certain purpose and intentionality and following through on obligations. So anyways, that's one way of understanding and looking at it, but it gets further, because what I also recognize, what is shared with me, is that when I complete law school, amidst all the conditions, all the challenges, all the delays and everything else, all the bullshit, at the same time, I'm provided with a tremendous amount of miraculous help and support. And we can even definitely say angelic support. That's extremely humbling. And even amongst my classmates, my friends, and additionally, who go on to practice the law, here's the kicker, here's the consideration. And this is further set up for what I'm about to share. Even when preparing to work for the system, the machine, what is recognized is that kinfolk invest their own dreams in life, their own aspirations of existence in this life within me. Seeing at that time, over 20 years ago, how true I am, how obligated I am within the cause of reconciliation between peoples, and that investing the dreams of kinfolk, saying, yo, I mentioned, I described the notion of being crabs in a barrel, and I'm able to get out of the barrel, and I try to like help kinfolk to get out as well. But then that situation of kinfolk just refusing to get out of the barrel. But this other way of looking at it is recognizing that, hold up, I am outside the barrel. That's facts. That's life. For better and for worse, the outside the barrel ain't a guaranteed and absolute paradise. But I'm out. And in trying to help other kinfolk out, reaching back, like that image in Black culture, through the decades, recent decades, one hand reaching back to lift the next hand over. As I endeavor to do that, and cats refuse to get out the barrel, it's easy to just become frustrated, saying, "I'll bump it." However, this is what I'm saying. I've already said it. This is what I'm getting to as a reminder to share the next joint. Is this: what I recognize is that kinfolk may be or may not be crabs in a barrel, but what I recognize is that how I get out of that barrel is because those same kinfolk who resign and work for the resign kinfolk selves and work for the machine or whatever else, where it would be easy to call kinfolk sellout, actually lift me up and support me to get out the barrel, saying, we see you can do it, we're entrusting you to do so, and now we have to go back into the barrel and wait for you to show how to make it happen. So anyways, that's just one somewhat convoluted way of describing him, but that's what I experienced. It's kinfolk who have entrusted me with their dreams. I don't know how many kinfolk understand what that is. Those who know how the game works, who are in the echelons, who are in the clubs, who have the tickets in life to do things, have to give up a lot of things to get that ticket. And one of those things, significantly, is dreams, aspirations, hopes, things to believe in. And so even when kinfolk have all these connects and capabilities, at the same time, kinfolk can have also a very dearth of light. So anyways, all that being said, what is recognized is that kinfolk invest their dreams within me at that stage, seeing what kinfolk see within me at that moment, and thus have to honor that. I can be accused of conjuring it or otherwise. However, I have to genuinely honor it, respect it, appreciate it, give gratitude to the Most High, and honor the investments that kinfolk make in me, to do what I do, to share what we share. So that's that's the setup for what I'm about to share. So that being said, as I'm starting to fall asleep whilst I talk again, I'll check the storage just to make sure as well. We're at 8, so it's not that up. We ain't got that much, to be honest. So it's beneficial to be mindful. Here we go. This is what I'm saying. Alrighty. Okay. So along similar lines about how it can seem very antagonistic interactions between people, but actually people are helping, and helping in a very sacred and giving way that's very low-key and difficult to spot from the surface, just from happenstance, but at the same time it's extremely formidable. So I'm falling asleep whilst I say this, so I'll just work on getting this out. This is what I'm saying. Being in law school can be likened to like being a gladiator, and rather than being a gladiator of the body, it's being a gladiator of the mind, and knowing how to fight others, argue with others, win arguments over others, and additionally, um, as a gladiator of the mind, and being rewarded heavily for victories, being punished or sanctioned for the defeats, but living the hard knocks life of a gladiator, cutthroat, high stakes, life and death, daily basis. It's not even sparring with other gladiators in the same school or other, because like the stakes is high and it's fierce, daily basis, literally 24/7. That's the nature of the competition, particularly within law school. That between gladiators, intellectual gladiators. And there's a scenario, particularly as I'm articulating in an autobiographic way, there is a scenario where a brethren emerges from the immediate school of gladiators. I mean, the coaches don't know that much, so the coaches don't demand so much in terms of training and otherwise, but the gladiator makes it through the school amidst all the competitions with all the other gladiators who are training and working to do the same in a different location at the cost of each other, less intense, less inclination towards I'm sleeping and losing consciousness. Talking about gladiators and the difference and everything, just get to the point where I'm talking to. Information, we observe that it seems beneficial simply to share information. And then when there's an interest for further discussion, I'll welcome the questions for such and then share it at that point. So the information here, let's see if I can focus on this. God willing. Gladiator. So going through law school is like that. It's intellectual gladiator. And I'm getting to the point where I'm talking about. In this particular scenario, I mean, I'm being autobiographical, but just calling it a scenario. In this scenario, a brethren completes the gladiator school, is able to like compete against all the gladiators, undefeated, is able to still live, and now is looking for involvement, you can say exploits, conquests, or whatever, raids in other lands. That's not what it is either. That's actually not what it is. That's not what it is. Here's what it is. The brethren completes the school and looks for like to settle into a vocation. Just say it. All right. I'm going to speak from my personal experience. When I graduate from law school, all right, let's see if we can do this. When I graduate from law school, it's like being a gladiator. Everybody's trying to argue. Everybody's trying to like be smarter than everybody else. Everybody's got ambitions one way or the other, and trying to run that game and set up their team as much as possible, regardless of what everybody else is doing. And during that time, I wasn't doing that. And I'm not saying I'm better or whatever else, but I wasn't on that. But at the same time, to be honest, I'm still gladiator. And what I'm saying actually is like I was further gladiator perhaps than everybody else because I wasn't going for the lawyer job. So one, other kinfolk weren't too tough or concerned about competing against me and trying to like conquer me because I'm not going after their job. I'm not a threat in that respect. So it's easy to befriend me in that experience, because I'm not gonna be double stabbing, backstabbing, double dealing or whatever behind people's back to get what to hear what they have to say and get some skinny on kinfolk and then use it against them and try to get with it whatever opportunity they might have had. That's not my stilo. That's not my interest, and I become increasingly recognized for that, and otherwise, for better and for worse. So point being that that's actually further gladiator. That's further pimp without even trying or without intending that. But that's actually what it is. So it's a way, and that's one of the reasons why kinfolk trust me with their dreams, because I'm committed towards that experience of reconciliation between the camps, between the constituencies, cultures, ethnicities, religions. So my point for this is that it's still gladiator, and I'm still having to contend and spar and fight with other gladiators, even just to exist, because that's the nature of it. It's just like annihilate whatever, anything that looks big, and yo, get at him. That's gladiator. So it's tenacious, it's nonstop, and it's a very different mentality. So my point for all this is right here, what I'm getting to. When I finish gladiator school of law school, the gladiator school that is law school, when I finish, I get immediately recruited into like an elite gladiator cult with higher training. And the thing about it is it wasn't a voluntary thing. It wasn't signing up for it, and it wasn't like a recruitment. It wasn't even proper notification per se. It was basically the elite gladiators knowing my proficiency in getting out of a gladiator school and saying, oh, we have to teach this one the things that we know, the ways of being that we know. We have to teach this one. And they're not going to want to go voluntarily. We're going to have to take this one amidst all their strengths. Force them to learn our way of elite gladiatorship for a greater purpose, for the purpose of facilitating order within the world. So what am I talking about? Basically, what happened was, after I graduated from law school, very simply, another way of describing everything that happened to me, or basically that happened to me, is that when I get locked up in the psych wards, that's actually a process of me learning the ways of doctors. And it's essentially, one way of looking at it is being involuntarily recruited by the doctors, so that the doctors can teach me about how to be doctored. Seeing that as a lawyer, I have a certain amount of proficiency in facilitating reconciliation, and doctors having a greater knowledge of what's needed in world society in terms of social order and otherwise societal order, that okay, this one looks like he can be a one that can be a leader in that process of world society, but he needs to know the ways that we know as doctors, the ways of healing, of medicine, of physiology, that most lawyers do not know, because lawyers have a skill set in letters further than within numbers. But I have a background in numbers with economics in addition to the letters. So, and then a track record of comparative success in dealing with the realms of gladiatorship amongst the numbers. And so, again, being involuntarily recruited by the doctors to learn further about the ways of doctors, the ways of healing, and otherwise, in order to continue on my path and then share that knowledge. And so that's basically what I'm describing. But I'm applying it, or likening it to, or describing it in the context of, again, like the gladiators, because I think, one, it's an accurate way of looking at it, and it's helpful to see like that nature of competition and otherwise. But then also the train of thought, concentration. Just being recruited by the doctors, and to know the ways of the doctors, knowing that I'm not going to go voluntarily, that it's going to have to be forced upon me. And that's what's done. When I go to the psych wards, I study, I observe, I learn how doctors do, It's primarily psychiatrists, but it's a number of different types of doctors, and it's the ilk in and of itself. It's within the fold of the Hippocratic Oath, seeing what life is like, what motivates people, what guides people, what obligates people, and otherwise. Doctors who have a tremendous knowledge about how the body works that is comparatively uncommon around the world. And thus there's a great need for the knowledge that doctors have. But the doctors don't have all the knowledge that's needed. So when they see someone like myself, then there's an investment that is made. Basically what I'm saying. And it's a very difficult investment. It's a very difficult next level thing, because I was just out of law school with all the trauma and drama and abuse and pains of doing that work, doing that intellectual pugilism just to graduate. Wasn't trying to like go through another training process to learn the ways of doctors. But it wasn't a choice I have. It was a necessity the world has. And so I learned much of the ways of doctors. I call it having a dishonorary doctorate, medical degree, MD. But the basics of it is that I learned further about nutrition, further about healing, and physiology and otherwise, as a way of having a fuller package of what a village needs and otherwise. So that's basically the joint. The purpose is basically to convey that experience of like going through a tournament, an experience of conflict that's very severe, being successful and fatigued, but then being forcefully recruited to go through another process so that's similar, and even higher advanced. And that's a general stereotype concerning the difference between doctors and lawyers within Western civilization, but it's generally recognized. Two different types of knowledge and practice, but at the same time, in terms of influence over people, and additionally, hierarchy, position and status of the hierarchy, there is a differentiation. Anyways, that being said, that's what I observed in my experience, even through the years after ongoing repeated occasions of such abuse. There's still that observance of being trained, that intentionality of being trained, whether I like it or not. And eventually, when learning, then having a further respect and communication accordingly. So still falling asleep right now. That's what I'm going to say at the moment. That's what it's going to be. What it's going to be. All things to praise the Most High Elohim. Blessed love and peace of Rastafari.